All right, everybody. Good evening, good morning, or wherever you're coming from. My name is Danny Le. I am a librarian at the Santa Clara City Library, and we have a special guest this evening. We got José Vadi, author of Interstate. I am so proud to not only call him a friend, but now I can call him an author who's now in the stacks at our libraries, or in the crates, as we would say in hip hop. José Vadi is award-winning essayist, poet, playwright, and film producer. He is the author of Interstate, and he is also the author of Soma Lurk, a collection of photos and poems. His work has been featured in the Paris Review, the PBS NewsHour, the San Francisco Chronicle, Catapult, McSweeney's, the Los Angeles Review of Books, Quartersnacks, Free Skate Magazine, and Pop-Up Magazine. But enough of me spouting about him. Let's give it up for José Vadi. What's up, my man?
What's up, man? Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, it's a pleasure being here. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome, man. I'm just trying to rile everybody up and wake myself up for sure. I took a 20-minute nap, so I'm good to go. So, Jill, overall, how has everything been for you and your loved ones, especially during COVID? And how has the response for the book for you been,
Yeah, it's crazy. With the shutdown and the pandemic, a lot of changes. For folks that have picked up the book already, you know, the part of the book was kind of written post-pandemic, so it's a crazy project, that started in 2016ish, and evolved all the way to September of 2020 is when it like ended. So through the pandemic and making sure family was good, thankfully, nothing too close to home, but definitely have family who are members of the medical field and work in hospitals. So definitely some concern there.
Mhm.
Shout out all of our folks working in those facilities in those fields all day. Um, but that being said, the book became like a nice distraction. It became like a nice outlet. It became something from like the before times, so to speak, to kind of like carry through this new thing and like, see through. So it was, you know, it just had to power through. But that being said, the reception's been really surprising and great so far. It's I really appreciate everyone that's done a review or has, read an advanced copy or has like, responded to me pestering them about, hey, can you check this thing out? So I really appreciate it. It's been great working with my publisher, Soft Skull Press. They're a part of like the Catapult, solar system of presses in addition to Counterpoint, and working with that staff. The staff works across all three presses, and they've been fantastic to work with. So this is all new to me, so it's a delight. I and it's really cool to see like what people will react to from the book. There's a lot of different threads for people to kind of tune into. So it's been really interesting to see what folks resonate, or what resonates with folks.
Um, Definitely hearing how you crafted it in kind of two different eras of the world at the moment when you really consider it two different worlds. But when you were creating these essays, how long did you have some of these essays already made, or were you making it as you went along with the changes in the world?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. So it kind of started with some essays that were published online through Catapult magazine. One of the editors there, who became the editor in chief of Soft Skull Press, Mensa Demary, he reached out to me asking for just, "Hey, do you have anything to pitch?" And that led to getting to Susie's and Standing in the Shadows of Brands. So those are two essays that were kind of kickstarted the book. And that was around 2016, 2017. And then it really just organically evolved from there. It became this kind of like this top secret project that Mensa and I worked on behind the scenes, really, and I submitted a California inquiry, and which is another essay that ended up in the collection. And I was submitting it as like a, hey, maybe this will be good for the online magazine. And it's at that point that in 2017 that he's like, you should consider writing a book. And I hadn't really thought of it until then, and a collection of essays and centered around California. And then when I started writing the essay Interstate, and the first draft of that got done around 2019, that's when we really saw this kind of organic manuscript become like this book, this thing that has, a title track, it has like like a North Star behind it. And so it's a little bit of both. It started off with those two essays, Susie's and Shadows, and then it kind of organically evolved from there.
I'm going to ask one more question before we allow you to, share some of Interstate.
Sure.
I just want to let you know that, a lot of my favorite contemporary writers, either fiction or nonfiction of today, somehow had their origin in, poetry and spoken
Yeah.
word. It's
Yeah,
kind of crazy. I don't know if it's thematic of the times, but we did write a lot of poetry growing up in that scene.
for
Some
sure.
poems can be 5 pages long for some reason, it's like, oh, this could be a book, um, can you tell us how poetry slam and maybe open mic culture prepare you for this book, and also in the language of crafting your essays?
Yeah, I mean, there's a it's a great question because, yeah, as you know, I mean, the Bay Area poetry scene in particular is very unique and very much um kind of a pillar within the larger spoken word kind of ecosystem, especially in that era where we both kind of came up in like the early to mid aughts. And around that time, I moved to the Bay Area from Southern California to go to college and quickly immerse myself in the UC Berkeley scene, and then I kind of evolved into some other scenes. You know, just the nature of the venues themselves, the open mics, the slams that are essentially like open mics with a clock. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Basically, with a timer and points. It's like by way of navigating that scene, and this is true for if you're into punk music or if you're into hip hop or whatever, you go to the venues, you go to the different neighborhoods. They're generally in parts of town that are maybe not the posh, Powell Street type of, scenes, but or the tourist attractions, to use Powell Street, right? But like, by way of that and getting to a scene, you get to know an area and you get to know the culture. And so like that kind of navigation of space, in addition to being a skateboarder, in addition to all these other things, like that really allowed poetry and like movement and like navigating this new city, this new space, to kind of be like part of my DNA as, as like a young poet, kind of figuring out my voice. And one thing I loved about spoken word was like that frenetic quality of, you can write something on the train, and that at that night you can perform it in front of a crowd of 20 or 700, depending on your confidence really, and how how kind of gutsy you want to be that day, and depending on whatever opportunity you have in front of you. So um and again, this is the early aughts, this is way pre social media, way pre digital. Our attention spans are different, the way we engage with art is different, there's a showing up factor
Mhm.
that was just different. And not to say that doesn't exist now, I mean, because live performances is a lot of way that a lot of artists make their real money, right? But you know I think that impacted my writing style a lot, of just like having movement, allowing yourself to kind of trust the cadence and allow yourself to just kind of go with that flow, pun intended, and to, but also not to lean on it too much as a crutch and be, a slave to wordplay, so to speak, and or to just be a rhyme machine, and then,
Lyrical, miracle, spiritual,
yeah, kill ya, and then like, et cetera, et cetera. And it gets crazy. But you think about deaf poetry, you think about Saul Williams's early stuff and how
Mhm.
revolutionary that was. I mean, we can't forget that, especially with history becoming an accordion, like that stuff was really impactful for a lot of folks, myself included. So I can already hear like five senses cannot, like I can already
Yeah.
hear like Saul Williams in my mind.
Amethyst Rocks, watching, reading
Yeah,
She for the first time, and, watching Slam,
huge,
and,
huge.
and it blew my mind. So, yeah, man, we can talk about that all day, but we want to hear you right at the moment. So,
Sure.
go ahead and I'll dip back and let you take over.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna read the first couple of pages from "Standing in the Shadows of Brands," San Francisco at Dawn. Mari and I got day jobs at the literary nonprofits that kept us on their payrolls through 2012 while we earned MFAs. Framed paper in hand, we returned to full time work funded by shoestring grants to manage arts education programs with equally vulnerable funding, scaling the horizontal hierarchies of the not for profit economy. Weekly, we'd meet for coffee on the steps of the 1390 Market Street building, a huge gray high rise of apartments and offices with a token Starbucks downstairs filling out the triangular block, its hypotenuse jutting north into the Tenderloin district. Discussing writing, our bosses, and what we really wanted to do, vague to serious outlines turned our conversations into those types of extended exquisite corpses that sharpen our wit and fortify what resolves remains on a random workweek afternoon. Across the street, the then mysterious offices of Twitter, a blue corporate bird marquee telling time for the Civic Center populace. On the other side of the cross street, the rumblings of a new high rise, an odd obsidian architectural thesis casting a larger and larger shadow over me and Mari sitting across the street. They named the building Nima, all caps, luxury condos and apartments. We're going to sit here and watch Nima grow up, Mari said, astonished by how fast and high the development grew before our eyes. In the post recession recovery programs the city underwent at the top of the decade, all we saw were cranes foretelling a future many here were not invited to inhabit. Indeed, the city's skyline was becoming the interstitial shots of Godard's Two or Three Things I Know About Her. Never seen it, Mari said when I referenced it, and I tell her instead about the white stone block of a handrail leading out of the nearby building's door, how skateboarding innovator, artist, and former San Francisco resident Mark Gonzalez used it for the landmark achievements in street style, and how it's still sessioned today. The new construction, a steady drum of sonic racket across a beautiful Art Deco preservation site turned tech office, rooftop couches and the like to boot. A comfort desired but so out of reach here, bay of Indian blood and 49er promise. The other night, I realized both of the cities I call home, Pomona and Oakland, California, have a Fox Theater. Produced by the film company of the same name, its chain of theaters grew nationwide during the 1920s and 1930s, overwhelmingly so in California. A few searches later, and I realized the site where Mari and I meet for breaks was once the location of San Francisco's own, short lived but truly ambitious Fox Theater. Just down the street from the still standing Orpheum and Warfield theaters, San Francisco's Fox opened in 1929, encompassing an entire triangular block for a Dean Martin, and Jerry Lewis concert. The theater's massively high arches, chandeliers, multi-level double-wing staircases, and a stage that accommodated both live performances and film presentations, an advancement for its time, created an overhead that far exceeded the investors' and promoters' pockets. I imagine that Hollywood celebrities could potentially catch an aquatic show at Sutro Baths in the morning and a show at the Fox at night. Some classic San Francisco venues gone by the time Haight Street became America's definition of the city by the bay. Despite solid attendance of the 4,651 seat theater, financial mismanagement bled dry any hopes for profit, making San Francisco's Fox, the largest west of Chicago, one of the shortest lived of its generation. And what of two artists from different states who both now share the Oakland to SF work commutes, who cover each other's tabs with money found in the back of taxis, who hold each other up while getting a future regrets phone number with the other hand, all home in Oakland where we wanted to run to in those moments, drinking sugary crap from a chain we despise in a city we tolerate and enjoy but always feel inside of and not a part of? The looks I get in some parts of town and the time she's been asked if her hair's real and I've been asked, do you work here? Would that still be the case, if not worse, if we were the help, working around the velvet draped Fox lobby, looking like the young photos of our grandparents in their early 20s? Would Abuelo or Mari's grandmother even be allowed into the building? When a city's populace is wiped of its longtime residents, so goes the collective memory of this city, replaced instead with a victor's pen stroke spoils, romanticizing the city's history away. Haight Street's advertised freedoms, Journey sing-alongs at Giants games, new and dull murals all over the East Bay. Welcome to Telegraph, Rockridge, Temescal, they exclaim, guiding newcomers through gentrification. Sitting there with Mari, I wondered what would survive the city. New buildings, new people, or neither? Until I realize Mari's doing this thing where her body tightens into a ball before she exhales, says, I gotta go back. Bye, friend. And we part until next time, when a new floor will be finished across the street.
I was gonna let you keep going.
Oh yeah, I could keep going too. Or like, yeah, I could read another section, or we
Yeah.
could do questions, whatever you feel like.
Um, let's hear some more, then we'll get into the
Sure,
questions.
sure, no problem. Thanks, man. So yeah, I've been doing a couple of readings and trying to read new stuff every time. So this is the end of an essay called A California Inquiry. It's kind of like a series of vignettes and snapshots of that take place in California. A lot of it's in Southern California, a lot of it's taking place during the wildfires of 2018, 2017. Um so yeah, so we're gonna I'll be I'll be talking about some of the fires of that time, and this is the end of the California inquiry. Since the year 2000, California has weathered 12 of the 15 largest fires in its history. The Mendocino Complex Fire, an amalgamation of the river and ranch fires, shot to the top of the list in 2018 with the Carr Fire at the sixth spot. Both transpired mere months after the Napa fires destroyed entire neighborhoods of Santa Rosa, with nearby Petaluma taking in hundreds of displaced families. The sky that week was a resin black screen of smoke, clouds, and ash spreading 60 miles south across the bay. Less than 2 weeks after the fundraiser dinner, the Skirball fire engulfed the Bel Air neighborhood of Los Angeles, burning over 400 acres of land along Sepulveda Boulevard and shutting down the University of California Los Angeles campus and those very parts of the 405 that I drove through to pick up my girlfriend at LAX. At one point during the 2018 summer, 19 active fires burned statewide, including the historic Mendocino Complex and Carr fires. 2,000 California prisoners worked with CAL FIRE to combat the flames, threatening a landscape many would otherwise not see, not to mention risk their lives with the hope of being hired upon release. But none were employed upon completion of their sentences. Prisoners received $1 an hour on top of a daily rate of $2 for their labor. Firefighters averaged $74,000 a year in the state of California. Upon release, none of these inmates were eligible for hire because they weren't licensed EMTs. State licensing requirements enacted in dozens of counties require more than a year of education for the lowest on the pay scale. These licenses are required for a quarter of state jobs. Citing a recent Institute for Justice study, a USA Today article noted that California ranked as the worst licensing environment for workers in low income occupations, with the average licensing requirement a staggering 827 days of training. Absurdly, becoming a professional tree trimmer, barber, or painting contractor in California takes vastly more experience than becoming an EMT, who literally holds the lives of others in their hands. Unquote. We lived too inland for most of the larger wildfires growing up, but we weren't immune to earthquakes. Of those few memories shared across Los Angeles County, no incident takes greater precedent for my generation than 1994's Northridge earthquake. Though the epicenter was over 50 miles west of our home in Pomona, everyone felt the violent force with which our world shook. 9 years old, I awoke to my father grabbing me, throwing me over his shoulder, and running down the short hallway dividing my and my sister's bedrooms. As I opened my eyes to the sight of my sister and mother following us, with sparks flying out of the thermostat mounted against the wall. We hid underneath a massive dining room table supported by six thick legs and sturdy crossbeams that is still in use today for hiding and eating alike. This was the trained emergency plan we learned in kindergarten, teachers preparing a generation of Southern Californians for all things tectonic disaster. Know your exits, avoid gas ruptures and downed power lines, find a door frame or bathtub, avoid windows, threats of breaking glass. We stayed at a hotel down the street at the LA County Fairgrounds for a day or two before power was restored. A year before Northridge, I was introduced to natural disasters in third grade by the back of a t-shirt worn by one of the most popular kids. He was the best soccer player in school and heartthrob of the preps, and he came from a known local Mormon family. The nascent perceived one percenters of this town were already aligned with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or the types of Christian denominations that would evolve into megachurches. by the time we graduated high school. But in 1992, after visiting one of his older siblings on a mission on the Big Island, he returned donning a t shirt with "I survived Hurricane Andrew" emblazoned across his back in frenetic neon, like a disco was being torn apart by the hurricane and its shrapnel had landed in the design. An 8-year-old little brother wearing the shirt seemed more heroic than the mission to spread the word of Joseph Smith to me. Yet I remember a year later in 1994 thinking about whether every kid across LA County who felt something, who ran under a table, a doorframe, whose parents grabbed them out of bed with all their might in those dramatic moments that define so much of our roles as parents, children, and the nebulous intersection in between, if we too would all get t shirts at some point, and if they would look as dramatic as those given out on the acquired island of Hawaii, designed for mainland dollars. The ongoing joke about a California earthquake so strong that the state separates, finally, from the rest of the country was probably dreamed up in some midtown marketing agency as a latent fuck you to the perception of the fun sun surfs up lifestyle. Yet the front lawns of every newly sold home for newly arrived Californians already predicts our exterior designed apocalypse, a waterless dry state, a cemetery of former agricultural empire. The biggest question facing this state isn't just its survival, but its destruction. A high speed train barrels through the Central Valley, home to one of the world's key food supplies, a region that fears losing what little water it still has after years of forcing cash crops out of its soil and becoming a ghost town without water instead. And all I can remember when I think of our state dying are Bay Area conversations 20 years ago about how we'll never need air conditioning, and further back, a shard of a memory of me and my crew skating a loading dock in Laverne circa 1997, watching the red sun dye the Southern California sky a hue I'd never seen, basking in the sound of urethane wheels in a state I knew I'd never leave. And now the question is whether it was real after all, whether our childhood setting wasn't just a virtual reality already up in smoke, as if California had already left the building, exited out the back door up the Los Angeles River, and hidden somewhere near Edwards Air Force Base. But then I remembered those visceral, intrinsic moments when the earth beneath our skateboard shook and we asked one another with our eyes, "Did you feel it?" This California inquiry answered in our stares, an accepted knowledge that dreams exist in the same time and space as nightmares, that this land's last line of defense awakes in chains.
Woo! I just had to do that for everybody else in there. Wow. I just know, and you can hear, I hope everybody, that the poetic tone and the way you, Jose, can tell your observational story by just telling us what you've experienced. There are many essays in the book that connected, such as a California inquiry, the one that you read, the Standing in the Shadow of Brands, but also the namesake of this collection, Interstate. I found that first essay to be the most impactful because you were taking a trip, right, down, was it the five, or
Yeah, like through the Central Valley, like I-5, 99, and different parts of 101. Yeah, those like the big three, and then there's Highway 1 on the coast. Yeah.
and can you tell us why you were taking that solitary trip, for those who don't haven't read the essay?
Yeah, like basically my whole life I kind of knew that my grandfather uh was well I always knew he was a migrant farm worker and that he migrated into the states by way of Oklahoma and Nebraska, and then he worked in the fields in Southern California. But I also knew that he worked through some of the more like historic fields of the Central Valley and the high desert and all the way through Salinas. And what I would find later out is, Santa Clara County, like in San Jose, and some of the cherry trees and things like that. So, I in 2005 or so, I recorded him on a high eight kind of handy cam, like an oral history style while he was still alive. He passed away in 2011, and after he passed away, I wanted to digitize this tape and revisit this narrative. Um, you know, uh, and I thankfully did, And it kind of just unearthed this whole, many conversations with family after I shared with them the video, and I heard new information about where he was traveling throughout the state, during his time here. And I was kind of piecing together like where his history overlapped with, like, say, different, recorded histories of people like him, or people kind of in the same geographic area. So obviously, like John Steinbeck and Dorothea Lange's photography and their work, during different times of the Depression and the kind of the big Dust Bowl migrations. So, in addition to, like, um, all sorts of stuff, Carrie McWilliams' work. So it's that all kind of led to me just kind of examining and going on these road trips and finding different parts of the state where my grandfather's history really intersected with these locations, and kind of just started looking around and snooping around and trying to see what was being preserved in these areas, what memorials existed in these areas for farm workers. And I discovered, um a lot of different incidents that happened to a lot of different types of farm workers that were very violent, both in the past and the very recent, yeah, and very recently, like against H-2A visa recipients. These are kind of, workers who are legally able to work here for a period of time. It's interesting just kind of seeing the levels of violence against any type of level of documentation of farm worker, undocumented or documented alike. It's like they're facing different forms of violence. So comparing that contemporary history to my grandfather's all led to these road trips, and then this essay Interstate. It became like this really big thing. I mean, it's like a 40 to 50 page essay in the book. It's a big chunk, but I wanted it to be, and this is a lot of my editor Mary's feedback, is like, if there's one essay that, people take away, can you write that? And it was almost like a nice creative challenge. And so, I wanted this essay to kind of stand on its own 2 feet, as if it was its own book, but also contribute and introduce people to this world that I'm guiding them through.
What I found beautiful about that essay, which made me think in how you honored your grandfather, but you honor how we also should honor those elders, or those who descendants who have come, how sometimes they don't speak their legacy into into books and words like we are so loud, that you've that retraced his steps in order for him to live on forever, and to be acknowledged. That's I found that very beautiful through Interstate.
Thank you.
And it's something beautiful as a trend in all your essays, that you acknowledge places that are either going to disappear or they're being forgotten. So in your essay, well, and I mentioned it to you, Getting to Susie's, an essay about, talking about your job, your past old job, and getting out of that, getting out of the office so you can rush to your favorite bar. And I think for many people of a certain age, your favorite local bar, your Cheers, if you have it,
Yeah.
that's where you find solace, peace, comfort, a place to cry, whatever.
Yeah.
And I found beautiful that you are there in the essay. You are the DJ, or at least the proprietor lets you DJ when you arrive. Talk about why you wanted to write about, Susie's.
For sure. I mean, I maybe it's part of, maybe it's a generational thing or something, but like, whether it was my parents' generation or just like people you read, like, I'm a big fan of people's habits. Like, I like how people have routines. I'm really curious about that. You know what I mean? And I that was a big part of, like, when I remember like being a kid and being like, I kind of like wanted a routine, like to be a local somewhere, to be like, to have your thing. And like, I've had that thankfully in a lot of different ways, and it's really just like finding community, right? Like, it's just like, you just kind of want to find community through your interest. Um I think my friend Mario Yedidia, shout out, was he introduced me to this bar called Summer Place, which was in the kind of Tender Knob part of town. And I refer to the Summer Place as Susie's, just kind of like to make an homage to the owner of the bar, Susie, um, who's been a bartender for years. But I'm not answering your question. But to answer your question, I really enjoy this bar a lot, and I feel like it's a rare gem of a bar. For a while there, um, it was one of the few. There was a handful of bars in the Tenderloin, as well as downtown Oakland, where you could allegedly, like smoke cigarettes inside, and there's like a little more of like a speakeasy kind of culture, and so those bars can be extremely intimidating, and this can be a coffee shop too, potentially, depending on like the culture of the space, you know what I mean? Like it can be, it really depends, but I liked there's a certain part of me for whatever reason that kind of is attracted to bars and that kind of, you know, frankly like seediness and like kind of like, just like anything can happen kind of potential, of anyone from the street can come in here and start some shit or, have a really, can just be a random like me wanting to hear oldies on a Monday night and because I'm too impatient to wait till Friday or Saturday apparently. So uh I don't know. I mean, and it's also like it's something I talk about in the essay is like this challenge of like controlling the uncontrollable, which is a city, and cities are so beautiful because there's so many opportunities to find a cheers, so to speak. And it doesn't have to be alcohol. It could be a sober skate session. It could be, going to a show. It could be, walking with your friend in a park after work, or it could be what I just described with me and Mari, just hanging out like on our work breaks. But, it's just cities are so cool because of the neon lights, because of the tightness of people, because of people walking around. And if you have this little sliver, this little kind of portal into the world that is like your little social club, that's very public and not private in any capacity, then like enjoy it while it lasts, kind of thing. And I love that bar because anytime you go in there, you didn't know what it was gonna be. You didn't know if it was gonna be someone like me just DJing and mellow tunes, or if it was gonna be like all the tables are pushed to the side and people are dancing. You know what I mean? Like, it can be whatever, and you need spaces like that, whether they're bars or not. Like, you need those spaces.
Yeah, it definitely transported me to my local dive, which is down the street here in Japantown, San Jose. And I was like, they don't have to know me, but they know me and they know what I
Exactly.
want, and I have to say nothing. you know, I can dip in and out in 10 minutes, and it's all good.
It's perfect.
But it's a place for me to rest my head in one ways or not more. Um, as you mentioned about cities, and that's something you do well in this book. You actually transport us into three different cities you've lived or lived in and been a part of. L.A., Oakland or Berkeley, both, and
Mhm.
San Francisco. Um, and as a skater, I know you you have a different observational view of things too. It's a different lens and how you see a city. Um, how has it been, especially in your essay spot check, how has it been, uh, you know, been enjoyable to write as a skateboarder in transversing a city? Because I'm not a skater, but you made me feel like I get what you're trying to do.
Oh,
Um,
sweet.
and also that the fact that in maybe a second part, now that the Olympics, you see skating as a sport, how do
Yeah.
you would you feel about that? Because you talk about architecture that does not is not friendly towards skaters, and
Yeah.
so how would that future look like for skaters and the inner city that they use as their own playground?
Yeah, I mean, uh just to kind of to start with the Olympic question, it's really interesting because it's a big deal. I mean, it is a big deal. It's the biggest deal that skaters were like very much concerned about for a while, and then after the Olympics, it was like on to the next kind of thing for us to talk about, which was like the big Copenhagen contest, which is basically like a big bar crawl, and it's like the complete antithesis of the Olympics, and now we're talking about that. So it was interesting. It was crazy to see a lot of the commercials that kind of came out of it. It was I think it, not surprisingly, the women were the most exciting. Like the women's competition in park and street was phenomenal. Uh, it's really interesting. So I'm curious to see what it kind of what generations it engenders. Skateboarding, and this kind of leads into the first question. Like skateboarding didn't fall apart as a result of the Olympics. You know what I mean? The Olympics needs. I'm paraphrasing Tony Hawk here, but the Olympics needs skateboarding more than skateboarding needs the Olympics. So, the fact that they were able to do it on better terms than if they didn't have like control over how they were being introduced into the sport, it's great. And to answer the first question a little bit more though, and skateboarding is, really globalized in a way that has made skateboarding not so like American centric. And as a result, being a skateboarder and consuming skate content online, much like journalism, skateboarding has gone from, print and VHS DVDs to like online magazines and online videos, YouTube and stuff like that. Instagram is huge, right? So it's like I consume now content from around the world. It's not just some kid trying to huck himself down 20 stairs in Southern California, the same schoolyard you see in every video. Now, like the spots and the world of skateboarding is that much more connected and closer. You know what I mean? Um, so as a result, writing about skateboarding is that much more exciting because um, new publications have popped up that are not necessarily American based, that are more welcoming to longer form journalism and storytelling around skateboarding. That in and of itself is a change, to have, different publications welcoming kind of literacy within skateboarding is pretty cool. Not to say that there haven't been people before that, but it's great to have examples from which to like learn and see how people are expressing, talking about this sport or this art form or this dance or however people want to phrase it. You can go in a lot of different directions. So it's great to have and skate culture and is more welcoming to, folks of a gender spectrum, in addition to women, gender nonconforming folks, trans folks. These people of these identities are now getting, you know, big support from big sponsors and publications. And that makes me, even as like a cis straight dude, like want to contribute more to the culture because it reflects more of like the world I want to be a part of. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So it's great. Long story short, it's great. It's a great time to skate, and I'm glad that the pandemic has brought a lot of people into like these individual outdoor sports like roller skating, BMX, skateboarding. It's really cool to see people out there doing individual outdoor sports with other people and just like taking over public space and like having a dance party on roller skates and crap. Like it's really cool to see. So more power to anyone that got into it during the pandemic.
I know, and I may they continue it on even after a pandemic and not get bored of it. Being able to see that kind of community outpour and connection is very good.
Yeah.
For my soul. That people are out to play outdoors again.
Yeah.
Um, I know, and if you guys are quiet, I know you have questions, but I have some more. I'm probably going to gear these questions towards you as a writer. Especially when it comes to nonfiction writing. Utilizing personal stories, people it sometimes helps drive the narrative in many of these memoirs or essays, but often you have to dig deep, maybe sometimes in troubling incidences or past situations that might be good for book sales, but not so much for your personal life. So, have you used techniques in ways to either protect those or yourself? Did you have to change name or situations throughout this book?
Oh yeah, that's a good question, and it's something that I remember in MFA programs too that we talked about a lot as nonfiction writers is like, how do you, but like, no, I didn't. In some cases, like in Interstate, there's some characters that said some comments that could be easily seen as like disparaging comments, right? Like, I don't name them by name. They didn't know that they were like on any type of, like record per se. So it's just me and my observations. So I kind of couch it as that, so it's not but then if people are on the record saying some stuff that, is pretty harsh, then they're on the record and I can quote them, so But I didn't enter a lot of these spaces where I'm encountering people like on the street or in, say, like a location. A lot of that sometimes was like happenstance. I didn't introduce myself as like a journalist, nor was I trying to be that. So, as I'm just a writer. So as using kind of tactics that come from journalism and being a historian and stuff like that to create these, creative nonfiction pieces. So, you know, by way of that, that's kind of how I approached a lot of the describing of characters, and to kind of mix like benefit of the doubt with like what I experience in real time. And then when it comes to family, though, a lot of the stuff I wrote when it came to people I knew, they oftentimes saw the first drafts, which are rawer than
Mm.
what is published. So it's like, it speaks to my relationship with my most immediate family, which is like very warm and supportive and transparent, particularly when it comes to art. So, you know, um, I think they would have gone about certain essays differently than I have, you know what I mean? But they respect my approach, and that's kind of all you can hope for. So, um, but yeah, that's kind of how I navigated it. I know other writers where there's maybe more of like a bigger family that they're trying to describe, or maybe a character can encapsulate 3 to 5 characters, that kind of thing. I tried to avoid that as much as possible, and there wasn't too much personnel in some of the essays. Is just me, navigating a city and just running into things. So, and then some essays are like jam packed with characters. So it was kind of interesting to navigate those two um voices as a writer, like one where I can be kind of like selfish, so to speak, and just kind of talk first person POV and just kind of go, and the others where I have to be very by definition considerate of like how do I introduce these people as for this essay. So
Yeah, you did a great job of and I'm glad you didn't have to go, use a lot of dirt on anybody or anything to drive your essays.
totally.
You definitely honored a lot of people, especially your family and those, especially in Daddy's Home, your essay about your
Yeah.
going back home in your FOC. Even though that essay did hit me in the core because it made me, I remember so much that I thought I was a failure to my family.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, I know that so much. Even now that I am a librarian or whatever, my parents were just like, well, he's not a doctor or engineer, but if you got a paycheck, it's fine. And I'm like, okay, well, at least
It-
that you respect that parent.
no, I appreciate you bringing up that essay, because I really wanted that essay to be for like kids who either are the generation born from immigrant parents, or are undocumented themselves, or who, or whatever that spectrum looks like, but like folks that understand that there's something different, a world that precedes you that you are not experiencing, that they experienced in a very real way. Like, Daddy's Home is basically like a panic attack on the page for that community, and like I really wanted to kind of almost be like, for folks to understand that, because I feel like it's always in those everyday banal moments when some real kind of heartstrings can get pulled. So, but yeah, that's family, and it's vulnerable for sure as a writer, putting myself out there. And it's great seeing some of the positive reviews, but it's also like, whoa, they're reading my stuff, you know what I mean? Like I really put my stuff out there, it's like, but it's part of the process. And
Jose, we all had our car wrecks too, bro. So
yeah.
we've all been there, man. So that's why I found myself endeared to that essay a lot because I'm still going through it. I think we all have that
Oh yeah.
situation still going through our family, despite any kind of claim. I'm sure this book success or is something minor to your parents. Like that's great,
Yeah.
that's fine, good
Yeah.
job.
But now he cuts his hair now, you know what I mean? So like that's like, can we talk about that? No, like it's funny, man. And it's great, and my family's been very supportive. And I didn't tell my parents about, for folks that have the book, there's a the epigraph is, I won't spoil it, but when it's a visual kind of epigraph, so to speak. And when I didn't tell my parents about it, but when they saw it, they were very, very hyped. So it's been fun playing little tricks on them too, revealing revealing things when they need to be revealed.
and you will continue doing it. We're winding down with the
Sure.
interview. I think I want to continue just like any tips for, I think a lot of us want to write. I especially want to start writing more essays and nonfiction. I didn't get to go through an MFA program,
Yeah.
but, I have some practice, right? But for
Mhm.
those who are also interested by writing their stories, and they stop from writing in diaries, right? But they
Yeah.
want to be able to craft their personal narratives into pieces, right? So, do you have any tips for folks to, be able to start doing that, or at least looking at their own life and being able to put it down in certain kind of moments?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think moments is a good approach. I think you kind of have to go piecemeal with it. You got to go real building block with it. Like this book is a product of me thinking about individual essays, right? So it's, you can start small. There's a lot of different recommendations I had. If you like writing, if you feel more comfortable writing on your phone in your notes app and not in a moleskin, do it. If you feel more comfortable taking a bunch of photos and then writing about what's in those photos or the memories those generate like a week later, do that. Experiment with those habits that allow you to just generate writing and put it on whatever paper you need to. Get comfortable just doing that. That can be journaling, that can be like the opening essay, opening paragraph in an essay, whatever. But just get used to that idea to generation. Get that synapses going, like, because that's the ligament that needs to be like, that's your jump shot. That needs to be like the Clay Thompson just buckets. You know what I mean? Like just let it fire, let it rip. You know what I mean? No one's judging you. No, like just have fun with it. And that's where you're gonna get a lot of your stuff. Like so much of Interstate. There's a lot of stuff in Interstate that came from like that's almost word for word from like just journaling and finding like, oh, like in the middle of this thing, like here it is. So have fun with it, document it, and then read a lot. A lot of writing is not writing. A lot of it is finding the voices that make you want to write. And then if you find those writers, see where they're submitting writing and see if those journals or those magazines are accepting pitches or publications, and use Twitter to find the editors for those magazines that you like, and pin pitch them, So if you want to, if you feel comfortable publishing something on Medium, do it, But really, I think the biggest thing for me is just like when you want to write, write. And then like the more you do that, when you sit down to write, your voice will be more present because you're used to it. Your jumper's there. When you show up to the court, whatever court it is, you're going to hit the jumper. So there's my basketball metaphor, and I
I was
cannot
about
wait
to
for the
say,
regular
let's
season.
go.
But yeah, just write. Just get used to it. Just you can call that journaling if you want to, or just jotting down notes. Whatever makes you, whatever demystifies it.
Awesome. I think it's so simple, but I think it stops most people from getting going because they don't start. So
Exactly.
gotta start. And I'm looking for the next, great writer publishing some work I can put in the library. So folks, listen and share that with us. It's just three rapid fire questions. Just choose one or the other. This is for fun.
Yeah.
Mission style burrito or California style burrito?
Oh, let's go mission style.
All right. Skate style, regular or goofy?
Goofy.
All right. Open mics or slams?
Wow. Oh, slams. God.
I got no more for you. I don't want to put you on the spot.
Oh, that last one hurt.
I know it's all good. Nobody's gonna have to quote you unless they watch this video, which they will.
Yeah.
All right. And anyway, last shout outs, hollers, let it flow right now, bro.
I mean, thank you, Santa Clara City Library. Thank you guys so much for having me and for archiving this conversation. That means a lot. Um, for anyone out there, if you document your friends and your family's narratives, do it. Take photos, take videos, write it down, save those voicemails, do it. Whatever you want to do, it's your story, it's your history, document it. And thank you to Soft Skull Press, the entire Catapult family. I really appreciate you guys. Thank you so much. And yeah, peace to everyone. And yeah, I just really appreciate it.
once again, everybody, thank you for joining us. If you don't have his books, he has a website, or go to Soft Skull Press, get the book, go to your favorite bookstore, get the book. And we're looking forward to number 2, man. So don't like make us wait too long, brother.
I'll try not to. I'll get some writing going. But thank you, man. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening. Support your libraries. They're
Yep.
opened up. They're ready for you. And your local librarian wants to make you happy. So make sure you tell them what you need. Otherwise, be safe, be well, and we'll catch you on the next one. Peace.